Thanks for Professor Xiaolan's kind introduction. I'm very happy to come to Bath University. Just a few words before my talk. I really thank the Center for Research in Education in Asia in University of Bath. And happily, I started my PhD in University of Bristol, so quite close to University of Bath. But it was the first time I came to University of Bath after 14 or 15 years graduation from Bristol. And coincidentally, Xiaolan just told me that she didn't go to University of Bristol. So I'm not in a position to say more exchanges between these two universities, but these two cities and universities are quite close. As Xiaolan just mentioned, I worked in second language pragmatics during my PhD. And I still do second language pragmatics, which is a periphery position between second language research and pragmatics. And also I teach pragmatics in Beihang University. And particularly after or during COVID era, many students find difficulties in doing research in SLA. So I have more students actually working pragmatics on social media. So today I will share although the title of my talk is sharing, right, but I would like to share one of the projects we are doing and we are continuing to do. So firstly, I will just touch on four aspects of sharing. The first one is sharing as social discursive practice, and then some factors influencing sharing practices on social media. Before I go into two empirical investigations we have already finished during the last couple of years. And then I will talk about some outlook and some ongoing projects we are still working on. The story when I became interested in this kind of social practice is during one summer vacation, I read some letter readings. I mean, we all work in academia. Sometimes even during your vacation, you sometimes feel guilty if you don't read anything for the whole month. So sometimes we may carry some academic books, but my experience is it's very difficult to focus on some complex and academic work. So each summer vacation, I bought some light reading. And this is, I think, a book I read 4 years ago, maybe, right? So during that vacation, I bought this book. It's called The Edge of Sharing. It's actually written by, I think, Nicholas John. We had email exchanges. I think he is working in economics, right? Not in linguistics. But if we look at the contents of this book, it's very inspiring, even for our linguists. For example, this book talks about sharing our feelings, and sharing files is straightforward for understanding. But sharing our feelings, I think, is really something caught my attention because I'm in charge of postgraduate studies in our university, and our university cares. I think maybe the same in the UK universities. Chinese universities care about their reputation. So every year, when postgraduate entrance examination started, we are kind of required to look at some social media to see whether there are questions they would like to ask, whether there are complaints that need to be answered by the vice dean. Right? So in my position, so every time I watched social media, I look at Xiaohongshu, Red, right? Frankly, for my generation or for my age, we are not supposed to use Xiaohongshu, right? Because my students, they always use Red, and they have kind of a meta-pragmatic reflection saying this kind of stories is not shared, cannot be shared on WeChat, cannot be known by professors, so we will post here. And they don't know, actually, I'm also using Red now, right? So the personal experience and the coincidence of reading this book give me some insights of working on this kind of social practice among Chinese youngsters. And in this book, it says that the term sharing has become very common and consisting of a lot of activities like sharing files, sharing economies, And sharing economies, later on I will touch on, is also interesting. And we have done a couple of works on online consumer reviews, I think, which is related to sharing economies. But also when we share knowledges or opinions, especially emotions and personal stories, I think this kind of social practice and how the students can express themselves clearly and suiting their own purpose is something really interesting to me. And also, sharing practice have revolutionized the way we express ourselves. If we remember or we recall what we have learned in pragmatics. So traditionally, pragmatics value three social pragmatic variables, including social status, social distance, and ranking of imposition, right? But if we think of communication on social media, sometimes you are not aware of this kind of traditionally important social pragmatic variables. For example, if you post something on Reddit, you will not know who will read your post. Maybe your friends, maybe strangers, maybe your supervisors. So that is what we are calling context collapse. So when you post this kind of one-to multi-party social media post, actually you are actually exposing yourself to different kinds of audiences. This actually challenges the traditional pragmatic theories, which we all learn and teach every year in pragmatic class. And also sharing, even for some theoretical linguists like Tomasello, actually he wrote in his book 15 years ago, 18 years ago actually, he says that sharing constitutes a universal function of human communication alongside requesting and informing. So even for Tomasello, sharing is one of the most common and basic or fundamental functions for our human communication. And currently, I'm doing another work actually related to sharing, that is oversharing. So sometimes you may think you are sharing your experience, you may think you are offering advice to your friends, but sometimes it is too close or too much for the others. For example, from my own experience, when I searching on Reddit, sometimes I think some posts are too close. They are even sharing their personal relationships, their personal stories, which for my age will think too close, too much, right? So oversharing is also something we are doing. We have a paper on a review now about oversharing, and I hope I can share with you later. And when we search the literature on sharing practice, we found that many works on Chinese social media practice still focus on Chinese politeness, faith, modesty, etc. So when colleagues, analyze the social practice, they always look for this kind of traditional concepts or theories to explain the new social media phenomena, which I think sometimes may not be enough, right? So we want to reanalyze the social media practice or phenomena. So the key question for this whole project is, can sharing practice on social media be explained by politeness or face work, the traditional theoretical approaches in pragmatics? As I just explained, so we would like to reconceptualize digital sharing as a complex and motivationally led practice. So it is said, sometimes you are the person you share, right? So if we look at no matter which at moments or read, people always share something very positive because we don't want to be perceived as someone negative, right? So sharing actually serves dual pragmatic functions. So you can share something for information exchange, and you can share just for relationship building, right? Sometimes we share, especially gossip among friends, right? Sometimes you have nothing new, right? But that is still important because it helps us to build our relationships. And sharing operates as a discursive mediated action that bridges our individual expression and collective meaning making. Right? So by sharing with your friends, we are creating local rituals or local conventions. And elements of sharing is also complex. Sharing can be complex by term in terms of content, and we can share, as I said, share news, knowledge, opinions, emotions, stories, etc. And the format of sharing is also diverse, right? We can share some links, some photographs, some files, emojis, videos, etc. And the purpose of sharing is also different. For example, even for my talk, right, I saw a lot of sharing, right, by some WeChat messages and also emails by Xuhai, and thanks for her, by the way, right. And also, sharing is very significant. But if we think, can we stop using social media for even one day without sharing anything? It may be very difficult, right? No matter you are sharing as a, poster or you are sharing as an audience, it's difficult not to use social media, even for maybe not a single day, maybe a single hour, right? So sharing is really changing our life. And also, as I said, sharing many functions, at least three functions. Firstly, is building our social relationships. We need to share with our friends, right? Especially recently, right? It's the Chinese New Year. I think we are all sharing, our wishes with our friends back to China, right? And also sharing can shape personal images, as I just mentioned. You perceive yourself as whatever you shared, right? And also sharing can advance social progress. No matter we are sharing my publication or our ongoing project here, or we are reading, sharing by news or books, right? So sharing can really advance social progress. Right? And also sharing is very complex and dynamic. Right? When we are facing information overload, as we just talked, right, we sometimes have to stop reading WeChat moment, right? Because many friends have more than thousands of friends on WeChat, right? I just checked my WeChat before I came in this building. I have more than 3,000, right? So if you check all the WeChat moment, it spends a lot of time every day, right? And also it's information overload, right? And also cognitive bias is the same. If we turn our own read, right? Read actually give whatever you like, right? For me, right? I always read some new publications on my read from my own friends, right? Because a lot of my friends publish it every day, right? So I got very much nervous, right? Because they publish every day by WeChat, posted on WeChat or read. And whenever you read it, read think you like it, and it continuous push this kind of publication to me, which actually, frankly, I'm not really interested and like it, especially during the Chinese New Year time. And also, by sharing, actually, we are faced with moral hazards, right? No matter you are faced with privacy breaches or rumor, right? Because fake news, right? You are not sure, you cannot be certain whether the news you shared is true or not, right? There are a lot of different stories, when some victims appear to be victims, actually is different. So the whole uh, phenomena, I think, is very complex and dynamic, which can give us a vast area for linguistic research or educational research. And for factors which influence our sharing behavior, firstly, of course, is technological affordances, right? So whenever the rise of social media actually helped sharing quickly and is help us to get more authentic and more quick information. And platform affordance also influence the behavior we share. For example, if we are using TikTok and Weibo and WeChat or Red, all the social media platforms actually give you different affordance. You have different sharing behavior if you use differently. And technological advancement, whenever the technology advances, it also gives us different um, affordance or different chances to share. For example, I remember maybe 2 or 3 years ago when Apple first announced the live photo, right? Suddenly, all the students, like live photo. But at the time, my phone was too old to to see the liveness of the photo, right? So technology forces you to use new technologies. And also like generative AI, I think generative AI and big data change our life greatly, right? Like we talked during break, even for thesis and honor review papers, actually, all the publications, publishers are faced with the challenges from artificial intelligence. And also it gives us a great challenge for education and also for linguistic research. And also social cultural factors also influence our sharing behavior. For example, social norms influence users' sharing behaviors, such as concerns over privacy protection and copyright issues. But for many Chinese students who just came to UK, maybe we are not familiar with the copyright issues, right? We are not allowed to photocopy the whole books, which may be allowed in some other countries, right? And also in China, especially during Chinese New Year, whenever I go back to my hometown, my relatives, especially from the older generation, they are very keen to know how much I can earn, right? But which is maybe not allowed in Western countries, right? Uh, and also cultural values impact users' sharing behaviors. Whether you are extrovert or introvert really influence the way you share. And also, social environment affects users' sharing behaviors, including influences from social events and societal hot topics, right? And individual factors, of course, right? Like I said, we have different motivations to share, right? So individually, we have different motivations, and we have different personalities, and we have different experiences with the sharing behavior and with the technology, social media platforms. So before all the background information introduction, I would like to share with you two publications or two small studies within the whole project. So firstly, some linguistic work about sharing in various contexts. I have to say this kind of grouping is very subjective. So I classified all the linguistic work of sharing into three groups. But according to your own research interest, you may have different categorizations. So firstly, I think a lot of work is examining sharing resources and stories. So the act of sharing resources, including information, photos, memes, especially memes. There are a lot of pragmatic works examining how people share memes online. For example, here I gave an example from Marta Daniel. So in a couple of works of Marta Daniel, she analyzed how netizens manipulated memes and sharing the memes for their own purposes. And also sharing stories is central to construction and negotiation of identities. A couple of works on migrating children, right? For example, I think this work, right, it examines two Greek students who migrated from Greece to Germany, and when they use Twitter or Facebook, which language they will use. It seems arbitrary, but after careful analysis, the researcher found that when the kids wanted their old friends or their friends from hometown, they will use Greek. When they want their new friends read their post, they use Germany. And when they want all the friends read their post, they will use translanguaging or language mix, right? So it's not that arbitrary after careful analysis. And also sharing perspectives and expertise. There's some work saying that they're like a TED Talk, like some um, sharing what they are good at for or some kind of advice. Currently, we are examining this kind of, for example, unsolicited advice. I think which is also very interesting, right? And also sharing experiences. Sharing experience can be from Monday experience to very significant moments. There are a lot of work examining colleagues, for example, Chinese patients, right? There are some works about cancer patients. So some patients will share their experience and expertise, right? And also online consumer reviews. I have done a couple of works on online consumer reviews. Online consumer reviews is a particular genre, also on social media. For example, if I'm new to Bath and I don't have friends here, maybe I will look at Dianping in Chinese social media to see which restaurant is good, which hotel is good, right? So this kind of sharing is also very interesting. So by reading the literature, I think at the time I thought, okay, I also would like to do something on linguistic analysis of sharing. So I edited a special issue on general pragmatics titled "The Pragmatics of Sharing on Social Media." So I invited a couple of friends. The first one is by Marta Daniel. That is the sharing Mimi I've just mentioned. And the second one is about sharing on TripAdvisor, so online consumer reviews. And first, I would like to write something on online consumer reviews because I have been familiar with this kind of particular genre. But for this very issue, because Irene already submitted the abstract to me before I finished my own abstract, so I thought I have to write something new. So I came up with this idea from the personal experience I just mentioned. So this one, because as I said, I often read 小红书, there are students who share their experience after they took examinations in Beihang School of Foreign Studies, right? So actually, I sometimes was the interviewer, and I'm always the person in charge of the exam behind. So when I read their experience, it's very interesting. Some students think they know everything. Actually, it's really a tiny part, right? Uh, and what attracted me is some students, they succeeded in recruiting our program. They share their experience. From teacher's perspective, I think this is understandable, right? And sometimes they failed the exam. They still share their experience. I think, oh, this is really interesting because considering my background, I did my master in Cambridge and a PhD in Bristol, but the all the projects I did was very from micro aspects. So it's not like education here, right? I did discourse analysis like Gillian Brown and George Yule, right? So I think, okay, I would like to see if the students failed their exam and if the students succeeded in their exam, will their experience change the way they express themselves, right? And also, the fourth paper is about sharing is caring. This is also interesting. Common did a comparison between sharing the same experience with your friends, with your family, and with your colleagues, whether the relationship changes the way you express yourself. Last work is also interesting. This work is done by two colleagues in the UK. They are they are doing the work from the other perspective. There are some celebrities who are kind of annoyed by their fans. So they will have kind of announcement saying, you guys annoyed me. I will never share my experience again, right? So the two colleagues are arguing that by saying you are not sharing again, actually you are sharing your own ideologies, right? So these are very interesting. I will quickly talk about the work I've done. As I just mentioned, sharing experience in digital communication is very interesting, and also sharing online consumer reviews. I will skip the literature review due to time limit, but this work I think is quite inspiring for traditional pragmatic research. So Ruth Page, also from the UK, right? Ruth observes that online forums are typically used to seek or offer information or advice, and they are using small stories perspective. So traditionally, if we think of stories may have a complete description of your experience, but from small stories can be fragmented, right? You can only describe one part of your experience. So we have three research questions for this small project. As I said, normally I only use WeChat. I don't use the other social media except Xiaohongshu recently. So I asked my students, I introduced my research purpose for them, and they told me that Douban may suit my research purpose better. So I listened to them and they helped me collect some data. So for this first project, we would like to answer three questions. The first one is, to what extent do the failure and success groups differ in how they disclose their identities? So I'm interested in whether your experience changes the way you disclose yourself. And the second research question is whether your experience changes the way you refer to others. And finally, I'm interested in whether the experience changes the way the posters, whether they are seeking or whether they are offering help or support. So data collection, we collect for the first project is quite straightforward. We collected 200 original posts from two groups. The first one is success in exam, and the second one is failure in exam. And there are a lot of similar groups on Douban, but we choose the two popular ones, right? And you can see from low spirits and high spirits. So the title actually coming from the two groups' name, right? So in Chinese, it's very interesting. The first one is 考试成功，兴高采烈，互相鼓励联合会. And the failure group is 考试失败，垂头丧气，互相安慰联合会. And the difference between the lengths of two groups of posts was not significant. So it only influences the number of strategies we analyzed. After collected all the data, right? If you are doing discourse analysis or pragmatics, you would know that this part actually is very laborious, very tiring. Although I will say it quickly, right? So as we spent weeks or months reading this kind of posts and try to have a clear classification coding system, right? So after reading for a long time, we think for the first question, we would like to code whatever information the poster disclose their identity, no matter age, gender, major, ability, right? Because it's meaningless for us to know the name. And sometimes, I mean, a lot of posts actually don't have any pseudonyms or names, but they will disclose age, gender, such kind of information. And for the second one, we could how students refer to different participation roles. The last one is easy, whether they are seeking or offering advice, right? So the first research question, after reading and coding the post, we came with three types of self-disclosure. The first one is neutral self-presentation. For example, I'm 30 years old. So posters offer some background information about themselves without any evaluation. And self-deprecation is they evaluate themselves in a negative way. And self-praise is they evaluate themselves in a positive way, right? And after coding, it's just straightforward, right? If we look at the two groups, so for failure groups, they actually have half self neutral self-presentation, and close to half of their posts are actually negatively evaluation, and only less than 10% they still self-praise. Actually, kind of surprised me, right? So even students failed the exam and shared their experience, they still would like to self-praise to some extent. And for the success group, it's very interesting. Success group actually quite evenly, right? So almost one third for neutral, positive, and negative examination. Right? There are some examples. For example, neutral self presentation, no matter for the failure group or for the success group, it's quite similar, right? They only say something from their background information, like their major and what happened to them. And for self-deprecation, you can say for the failure group, uh, sometimes they say, I no longer believe in myself. While preparing, I shed tears and felt like waste. Even for the success group, they kind of evaluated themselves in a negative way, the same. Maybe due to Chinese modesty, right? But for the self-praise, it's quite interesting. For example, if we look at the success group, they say, I'm so happy. Even I didn't expect that I could be so powerful. Right? So they praised themselves. This is understandable because they succeeded in the postgraduate entrance examination. But let's look at the failure group. So even if students failed in the exam and they couldn't go to the universities they want, right? They still say, maybe I'm somewhat smart. I could do well in elementary school without studying hard. In addition, I'm cute, smart, and popular with the teachers. I always felt I was different. So even if they were sharing their failure, they still don't want to feel or sound so useless, right? They still want to say, actually, they are good, right? And interestingly, if we look at the way they refer to participants, for failure group, on average, so for each post, they refer to themselves almost 1.5 times. And for third party, it's almost two. And for audience, it's only 0.3. And for the success group, they mentioned to themselves 1.2, and the third party 1.4. And even for audience, it's almost one mention per one post. Right? And for seeking and offering advice is understandable. So for failure group, they seek advice more, right? Like 77%. But still, like 22%, they are offering experience or expertise from their failure. Right? And for success group, it's quite interesting. The 94 or 95% of posts actually are sharing their advice, but still, 6 times or 5% of the posts are actually seeking for advice. But if we look at the posts qualitatively, uh, the way or the kind of seeking advice is quite different. So for the failure group, they are authentically asking the real advice, like what is better choice, need advice. But if we look at the success group, sometimes even the seeking for advice is kind of self-praise, like what's Farah said, right? Like this one, I want to have a grand celebration. I'm a social butterfly. As long as it's not illegal, I can celebrate it anyway. For example, I'm thought of putting banners in Halilao. Do you have any good suggestions? So this kind of seeking advice is totally different from the failure groups seeking for advice. But for offering advice is similar, right? So if we think of what we found and what we have read from the literature, it's quite interesting because sometimes we think for social networking, it may encourage anonymity, right? Especially when we share something bad, something negative, like our failure. You may think students may want to be anonymous, but still we found that students will disclose their information to some extent. We argue that it may because of if we read something like a post on Douban or post on Reddit, the authenticity or trustworthy is also important, right? If the students didn't disclose any information, you may think it may not be authentic. You will not read it, right? So the way they want to be read pushes themselves to disclose some information to some extent. Uh, and also, if we look at the references to others, it's quite interesting because if you have read a paper by Lyons, this paper is actually from psycholinguistics. So Lyons did a complex examination of students who are depressed or in pressure, and students from a control group. And he found that people experiencing distress used the first and third personal pronouns more frequently than people who were not in distress. So even without some complex instrument, just some, I mean, linguistic analysis about our posts, actually we found the same, right? So if you recall, for students in failure group, they used more first and third references. And for success group, they used more second references, right? So even if we just analyze our own posts or the others' posts, our linguists can show or review whether students or posters are in kind of distress. And lastly, we know no matter the failure group or success group, they both seek advice or assistance, right? So after this small study, this small study, if we recall, we actually examined the same theme. Let's take the exam, but we compared two opposite results, whether they succeeded or whether they failed. So after this paper, I'm interested in whether the different topic or different experience influences the students' expression of themselves. So I did another study, which is this one, sharing second stories in online comforting interactions. So in this paper, we focused on only the negative experience. And I informally surveyed my students, asking them what kind of experience they think are very crucial for students. They all gave me two answers. One is exam, the other is personal relationships, right? Whether you failed you lost your romance, right? So we decided to focus on negative results of these two themes. And so before we started this work, we look at the literature. We found it's quite interesting. Although comforting is very important, like if your friend failed their exam, if they just broke up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, right, they are in a difficult situation. They need your comfort, but sometimes we don't know how to comfort others, right? If I think of myself, I'm not good at comforting, right? The only thing I can do is pat their shoulder, right? Say, okay, tomorrow will be better, right? And I don't know how to comfort the others. And interestingly, if you look at the literature, there are few works on comforting. So before we started our work, we only found some works on comforting in back to 1990s. Some American colleagues, they had some works from all from communication field because in 1990s they were interested in at the end of the year some some colleagues were fired or so as a personnel manager or as a colleague how you could comfort your colleagues. But after that, there were little research on this kind of topic. So we decided to do work, and I gave you the reference here. And coincidentally, another group from Harbin, Harbin and Beijing, and they also were doing work on comforting in Chinese. Uh, so it's interesting that although we think our Eastern cultures are more hospital, right? But few studies really did this kind of work. This actually attracted my attention. I think as a applied linguist, I should do something, right, which is interesting and also important. So I started to look at how we sometimes use the second story to comfort the others. Because from this paper, we found actually we have different strategies to comfort your friends. And I'm interested in this particular strategy, which is the second story. I'm not sure whether you are familiar with the second story. Second story is a classic concept in conversation analysis. For example, if your friend say they failed the exam, and you will use your own experience to comfort them. But from sex analysis a couple of decades ago, and he found when you use the second story to comfort the others, you always align in perspectives. So when they say something bad, your story are also something bad. When they say something happily, you will give them a happy experience. So they are aligning in classic research. But Ruth Page, if you remember, she analyzed a very particular genre, that is gym, a forum about gym experience, working out. There is an interesting post by a lady who just finished her workout, and she said she always finds some guys looking is very impolite, right? And she posted this unhappy experience on forum. And interestingly, Page found there are some second stories different, not aligning. So she analyzed the second story in that gym or working out online forums, and she found that in addition to supportive second stories, there are also dissociating second stories. So different from the classic conversation analysis, which is interesting to me. So I would like to, because if you think that kind of forum, they don't know each other. So we would like to see whether in a certain support groups, so support groups, we are assumed to align each other. So we would like to see whether this kind of support group will give us whether the same or different findings. So this study, we would like to answer three questions. First is what types of second story are used in response to first stories related to online comfort seeking, and whether the themes, as I mentioned, a failure of exam and loss of romance will influence their second story. And to what extent do different themes influence the narrative perspectives, and what interaction patterns emerge among participants in this kind of social practice. And again, we use Douban. The first is what we already collected, the failure of exam, and we collected the other group, which is called lost friendship. So 友谊的小船，我一个人也能划。And for this data collection, it's more complex because we only focused on second stories. So we have had to look at the responses. So we used students to read all the posters. And we finally came up with 100 second stories from each group. And again, it's laborious coding. And interestingly, we found three types of second stories. So this is a good news for every researcher, right? To have something new, you can write your own papers, right? So we find aligned second story, prospective second story, and divergent second story. And for prospective story, it is you reflect a similar past experience, but the focus is shifted towards potential positive. And for divergent, is you give a new perspective for second story. And the second research question, as I just mentioned, is whether the students will use, when they share the second story, will they say it's my own experience or my friend's experience? So if we hypothesize, do you think you will, do you think posters will say it's my own experience or my friend's experience? Yeah, I mean, at first I predicted maybe we would say my friend because it's all negatives. Negative is not something you can praise yourself, right? But that is only hypothesis. So if we look at the three types of second story, still aligned second story is the majority, but divergent second story is also one third. And prospective second story actually is the less frequent used perspective. There are some examples I will just skip. But if we look at this, it's quite interesting and contradicted with what we thought, right? So no matter students shared their failure of exam or failure of friendship, more than 90% of students say that's their own story. This is not their friend's story. Right? And for interaction patterns, it's also very interesting. Sometimes posters just post their story and replied and finished. So even the OP didn't come back. And sometimes the OP come back, and sometimes there are other layers of replies. This was not analyzed according to time, but just according to logics, whether you were replying to whom, right? And there are some very complex interaction patterns, like the OP first, the reply one first, the reply in, and then OP. And sometimes the OP just reply to reply one. And the single response is the majority, and then circular interaction. For the other two, they were not used, they didn't occur frequently, but it's still interesting theoretically, right? So we found three types of second stories, different from oral communication, and also Ruth Page study about online forums. And replies actually exhibit a preference for narrating their own personal experience rather than from the third party, right? This may still link to what we said about trustworthy and anonymity, right? So maybe posters think if they say it's the other story, it's not that trustworthy as their own stories. And also it's on anonymous social media. It's not like WeChat. So maybe posters think they won't lose face as much as in oral communication. So if we would like to continue examining sharing from linguistics or social media or even educational perspective, I think we can explore the intersection of pragmatics and digital communication and examine how this kind of practice evolves and adapts in response to technological changes and societal shifts. And also with the rise of generative AI, investigating how AI-generated posts redefine the norms of sharing, I think is very interesting. So for the last couple of years, we have been examining how social media shape our experience. I think generative AI definitely will reshape the way we share, right? Like if we don't know something, right, I noticed I will stop asking my friends. I will always ask ChatGPT, right? Also, there are a lot of work. I'm not familiar whether you are using it, but from my friend's son who is in junior high school, he mentioned that they are using generative AI for romance now, right? And coincidentally, one of my PhD students is interested in human and generative AI romance interaction and pragmatics of this kind of social practice, which is too much for my age, but I think still very interesting, right? I'm not sure whether they would like to. I'm not sure why they would like to, chat with generative AI. But some of my friends said generative AI always comfort you, always give you satisfactory responses, much more reliable and happily than your boyfriend, right? And also, due to the absence of a collapse of context and variations in interpretation, I think shared content may lead to misunderstanding or even conflicts, right? Because you can't see the emotion of your communicators. Sometimes I do feel, even from my own experience, there are more misunderstanding, there are more conflicts from text to audio to video to person, right? And lastly, as digital sharing involves sensitive communities and also personal information, I think the ethics of researching these spaces demand greater attention. I have read many papers on ethics in education, ethics in assessment, ethics even in linguistics. I haven't read anything about ethics in pragmatics on social media. I think this is also a vast area for all the researchers and publications. And due to time limit, I think I finished my talk here.
Reading a wonderful, very interesting, which I've never really thought about. I think social media is one of the areas that we, like what you said, we all use it. I do want to ask a question.
Yeah.
I don't know if the audience, if you have any questions, or the online audience, if you have any questions, you post it. I will just ask my question. So I can see that there are many different factors influencing how we post, how we disclose our identity. With something like this, what are the implications for our individual linguistic behavior or culture behavior, or even self-well-being, development? So would you please, let us know, what kind of implications these studies will have for us?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Professor Xiaolan. I think the way we have this kind of research is not we don't want to prescribe the social media behavior and saying which is correct and which is wrong, but still I think the straightforward or the crucial implication is at least we can understand the others, right? We can see whether your friend is in distress just by looking at their posts, whether they are still using second person pronoun or they are just talking to themselves. If they use more first and third, but if they don't use anything about the audience, that means perhaps they are in distress. So I think this kind of work can understand our friends better, and by that, in turn, maybe we will know what kind of behavior actually are welcomed by your own friends. Even if you are maybe introvert, whether you still can be familiar with the way popular among your friends. I'm not saying we have to change our own way, but at least we can understand each other better. If you are introvert, you want to express yourself explicitly, but your friends express themselves introvertly and implicitly. Maybe you will understand they are not in a way they don't like you. They are just in a way they express themselves differently. Yeah.
This is very interesting. In psychology,
Yeah.
studies psychology or social culture, social psychology, they try to try to define why certain people behave in the way they do.
Yeah.
And also at university themselves, that we find more and more suicidal cases.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be something drawing our attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. From the difficult perspective to watch what kind of social media and people posting, how do we read this social media message, maybe that will inform us how to conduct the well-being session.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think because from even no matter from conversation analysis or psychotherapy, as you mentioned, a lot of work have been analyzed from telephone conversation or oral communication, but not as youngsters. Actually, they don't use telephone anymore, right? Even for myself, I'm very afraid of somebody calling me now, right? I don't know whether you are familiar. If somebody call me directly without asking me what I'm doing. I sometimes I'm very nervous. I even shut it and I'm saying I'm busy. Actually, I'm not, right? So people are more familiar with texting each other rather than straightforward calling, right? So I think this is the way we have to care about the youngsters. Yeah. Yeah, maybe everyone is hungry. But anyway, if you have any question or comment, you can email me. Yeah.
So much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Where thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, online people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Nina, you are there.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe quite a lot of people.
yeah. How how shall we close it? We just shut it. Okay.
Oh, but we do have two chats. 语音 is there. Good afternoon, everyone. Is there any certificate of attendance? No. Thank you. Okay. All right. Do you know how to turn off this thing?
We
Or
just
close
we just close it.
Yeah. Okay.